Alright guys, so today we're going to be doing the 3-sum question. So this question in particular, similar to its name, um, or referring to its name, it's similar to 2-sum, right? However, in this instance, instead of just having 2 pointers, we're going to have 3. Originally for 2-pointer questions, we have, one starting at the beginning, one starting at the end, and, while the beginning is less than end, you know, depending on whatever happens or your conditions, they move, right? Similar cases, you're going to be doing the same exact thing. However, we're going to have to add another pointer, and we're going to add that pointer by iterating a for loop, right? So how that's going to look is this is the question, right? And you're basically given a class, and within that class you're given a function, and that function is those functions arguments are just self, which is just within itself, and then nums, right? And nums is going to equal an array to basically what's up here, right? You don't have any argument named target, right? You could, but for this instance, our target is just 0, right? So the first thing we're going to do is usually give you sorted array, but I always do this just to make sure, is to A, sort the array, right? And then B, make a variable called answer, where we're going to basically return this once the code is done, right? The expected answer is going to be here. And then after that, we're going to create a for loop, right? So we're going to do for x in range of length nums, right? Minus 2. So the reason why we are doing minus 2 is because we're going to have 2 pointers, right? And we could even see this right now. We can make start equals x plus 1. End is going to equal the length of nums minus 1. And current is going to equal x. Okay. I'm actually going to put current on top because I like that better. Okay. So these are our pointers, right? And I'm going to show an example of why we have this minus 2, right? So what we have right now over here, so current equals x. So this is the first iteration. Current equals x, which is negative 1. Start equals x plus 1. So if start equals x plus 1, it's going to be just the index right in front of it. So in this instance, it's 0, right? And n equals the last index, right? So 4, or negative 4. Throughout this entire code, the for loop is going to continue, and x will move, right? And if x moves, so will start, and so will end depending on the conditions, right? However, what's going to happen is, let's say if n stayed the same the whole time, and x and start are the only things moving, right? The second iteration, or first, is going to be 0 for x and start in 1, right? Second iteration, x is now 1, start is here, right? And then next iteration here, right? So this is exactly where we would stop. And you could visually see why we do minus 2 is because we need space for our start and end pointers, right? So if this wasn't minus 2, x would literally go the whole way, right? And start wouldn't have anywhere to go because start equals x plus 1. So start and end would be on top of each other for the second to last, right? Which already wouldn't work. And then if you were to do it again, right, x would be last, and then start is equals nothing, right? Start equals x plus 1. There's no x plus 1 after this, right? So this is the reason why we have the minus 2. And then with that, we are going to just do some conditions, right? So we're going to do if x is greater than 0, meaning if we are past the first iteration, um, and if nums at index x is equal to nums x minus 1, continue. So what this basically, continue, there we go. So what this is doing is it's checking if x is greater than 0. So in this instance, this wouldn't work because it's not greater than 0, x. So it would only work anything after this. And what it's saying is like, okay, so if x, if num's at index x, so in this instance, be 0, if the number before it is the same, continue the for loop, because we don't want to have that, right? We don't want repeats of the same answers. So with that, we would just continue, and then x would be here if this was equal to 0. But because it's not, we just skip it, right? And then we are going to go and do the while loop. So while start is less than, we are going to go and we are going to make target a variable where it's going to be nums at index current plus nums at index start plus nums at index n, right? And then this is when we will do our if statements, right? So if target equals 0, so if we basically have the answer, the first thing we're going to do is answer dot append all this, right? So this is if we find the answer, we are going to add this, right? However, we are not done because it's a for loop, right? So we're basically iterating start and multiple times to make sure that there isn't anything left out. So we're going to do while start is less than n. These are more condition stuff. Conditions. While start is less than n. And if start at index, or I'm so sorry, if nums at index start equals nums at index start plus 1, we are going to do start plus or equals 1. And then similar to this, we're just going to do this, but instead of start, it's going to be end, n minus 1. Okay. So the reason why we're doing this is when you look at this if statement, right? The first thing we're doing is adding these numbers into the answer list, right? That's a given because this is what we want to return, right? And we actually need to make this like that. Okay. And for the conditions, right? So this is basically checking if there's duplicates, which we already did up here, right? But we're doing it down here for this instance where if nums at index start equals nums at index start plus 1. So let's say we're here, right? And we want to make sure the number in front of it doesn't equal the same thing, because if it does, then there's no point, because we would basically be running this code with the same exact number, and we don't want to risk getting the same exact output. So we just do start plus equals 1. And similarly for n, we do n minus equal 1. And down here, right, after the while loops, we will always iterate plus 1, and for n minus 1. So if this while condition, let's say for instance start is true, we're iterating twice, right? Basically skipping the same exact number. And same thing for n, we would skip 2 times, right? If these while statements or these conditions weren't met, then we would just forget about them and just iterate once, because it's a whole different number. So most of the time we're going to be doing this, but these are just conditions to make sure we don't get the same thing, right? And then this is basically just the meat of everything, right? Else if target is less than 0, right? Then what we will do is we will just do start plus equals 1. Oop, my bad. Plus 1. And then else if target is greater than, then n minus equals 1, right? So this is just normal. This is what we're used to, right? Then down here, we are going to return our answer, right? And this should be it. Let's go and test this out by doing answer. Do, do, do. We can just do like test. Test equals 3 underscore sum. Print test dot sum. And we're gonna pass in our argument right here. And let's run this. Beautiful. And there you go. And you get your output. Perfect. So this code works, right? The output is correct. Like mentioned, we explain why we have the -2. The conditions here for the greater than is to make sure that the number before is not the same because we don't want that. And if so, we just continue within the for loop, right? Because there's no point of iterating if it's the same. For these are our pointers. We have the while loop, which is very common when we're working with 2 pointers. We set our variable target. This is what we use to compare, right? This is basically saying if we get our answer, right, append it, set these conditions, and make sure to iterate start and end so we can continue going on, right? And these are just the elif statements, if this was not the answer, right? And overall, yeah, no, perfect.